Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is indeed a challenging time. So we are very, very thankful that we have such wonderful guest speakers this evening. And I'm going to introduce them first and then ask them to say a few words each, and probably up to 15 minutes each. And then we will take questions, because I'm quite sure that everyone is very anxious to ask questions. So in alphabetical order, we have with us this evening Jill Bellomy, who is the chair of the Texas Association of School Librarians, hooray, and Mary Woodard, who is the Texas Library Association president-elect. Wonderful. And in the interest of time, I'll let you both explain some of your background, if you like, rather than everybody listening to me. So have you decided which one of you would like to go first? Mary. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Mary Woodard, over to you.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's a delight to be here with you this evening to talk about this very important subject that has us all concerned, and we're going to fight through it tonight together. So I am, as Barb said, I'm Mary Woodard. I am president-elect of TLA, but I am also the director of library services for Mesquite ISD. Mesquite ISD is a school district of about 35,000 students. We are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we are a Title I district. So we serve a lot of the folks that these books are addressing. So we'll get into that. I want to start off with just a little bit about the current environment and kind of where, from my perception, where this started. So I'll start with a little bit of a story time. Last summer, during the legislative session, there was a bill that was passed, House Bill 3979. If you're familiar with that, it was known as the Social Studies Bill. And part of what was in that bill said that a school district may not require or make part of a course the concept that an individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of the individual's race or sex. And then it also said that a teacher may not be compelled to discuss a particular current event or a widely debated or currently controversial issue of public policy or social affairs. And a teacher who chooses to discuss such a topic, quote, shall strive to explore the topic from diverse and contending perspectives without giving deference to any one perspective. So this was passed this past summer and sent a lot of school districts into a tizzy just from this legislation. You may have heard or seen in the news that there was an administrator talking about that we needed to have books on diverse perspectives having to do with the Holocaust and things like that. You may have seen that in the news. All of that kind of stemmed from this legislation. On December 1st, House Bill 3979 went out of effect, and Senate Bill
You're muted.
I don't know what happened there, why I got muted.
Okay, please carry on. Sorry.
Okay. So, so as of December 1st, Senate Bill 3 has superseded House Bill 3979. And so what Senate Bill 3 does, it has pretty much the same language as the House bill, but it has expanded to cover all courses, not just social studies courses. So, and it includes much of the same language. But what you will notice is that this legislation is talking about class discussions and course content. It is not talking about library books. But what has happened is that some people have extrapolated this law to include instructional materials and library books. So that's kind of where a lot of this came from, I believe. We've got two separate issues, to my mind, going on. We've got, first of all, we have some conservative political action committees and groups that are very organized. One is called Moms for Liberty. I haven't seen them active in Texas so much, but I know they've been very active in Tennessee and New Jersey, I believe, so in other areas of the country. But here in Texas, we have seen people from a group called No Left Turn in Education, and they are encouraging their members to attend school board meetings, file open records requests, and things like that regarding library books that they deem objectionable. And they are also providing lists of books for their members to look for. We had a district in my area that was asked for the entire catalog of a school library as an open records request. So some districts are responding by charging the requesters. The law does say that a district is allowed to assess a labor charge of $15 an hour to locate and answer a request that's more than 50 pages. So there are some districts that are doing that in response to some of these, really kind of outlandish public information requests. So there's that piece of it. And then there was also the letter from Representative Matt Krause, which was a list of 850 books, and no one seems to know where this list came from. It appears to have been cobbled together from a lot of different lists. There was a post on Book Riot that did a deep dive into the list and what is included on there. And what I thought was interesting was that a lot of the books on the list were so outdated that if they had not been weeded from a library already, they needed to be. So it was very interesting where some of these titles came from. But what he asked for in his letter is he wanted to know how many copies of each book on the list the district had. And another thing is that not every district in the state got this letter. It was certain selected districts, and nobody really knows who got it and who didn't get it, unless the district has identified themselves. But it asked for how many copies, at what campus locations, and it asked for including school library and classroom library collections, which was very difficult for my district. We could not provide that information about classroom collections. They are not cataloged. So we really had no idea. And then the second thing he asked for was the amount of funds spent by the district to acquire those books. And then the third thing is in the letter, it asks for districts to identify any other books or content in the district that addressed or contained the topics human sexuality, sexually transmitted diseases, HIV, AIDS, sexually explicit images, graphic presentations of sexual behavior that is in violation of the law, or, and this was the kicker, contain material that might make students feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress because of their race or sex, or convey that a student, by virtue of their race or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. And you'll notice that that language is directly from House Bill 3979. So that was the piece that my district, we responded that we could not comply with this request because what might make one person feel discomfort, another person might not feel discomfort. So we could not assess what books those might be and respond to that piece. Some districts did not respond, others did respond. In my district, we went through the list, we identified the books that we have, but we did not send the information. We felt like after considering it, they went ahead and asked us to do it, but after considering it, they decided that it wasn't an official request that required us to respond, so we did not. We have the information. Going forward, if for some reason they come back and say you must respond, we have the information and we can do that, but we have not sent it in at this point. So, and like I said, other districts responded, and some districts have even gone beyond what was requested, asking librarians to review the books that were on, that they have, that were on the list, looking for what they've termed pervasively vulgar content. So that's kind of the situation right now where things are, just from my perspective. And so I'm gonna toss it to Jill, and she's gonna talk a little bit about her perspective as a campus librarian.
Thank you, Mary. That was a not very pleasant story time, but you made it very pleasant. If anyone could, that was a perfect recap. I think you gave us a great starting point. So I am Jill Bellomy. I am the TASL chair. I am the lead librarian and a middle school librarian, or actually intermediate / middle school librarian in Highland Park in Dallas. We're a very different district than Mary's district. We have about 7,000 students and a very different demographic, but we also have very eager readers who need their rights protected as well. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And as Mary said, I'm going to give a campus perspective of just some of the things that I'm doing, and I'm sure many of you all are doing, things that we've all received advice on what we should be doing, and just talk about a few of those things, and then we'll go from there. So the first thing that I, of course, have done and would advise that anyone do, and I'm sure you all have heard this and are doing it, is to know your district selection policies and procedures. When I first became a librarian, I probably could have found that for you if you'd given me a little bit of time, but now I know where that is. I have read it, I know it. My district librarians, we've read it together at our meetings. We know what's covered, we know what's protected. And once you read through that, I think that you see that the policies for your district really do cover a lot. And kind of put us in a better spot than we might have thought that we were. So definitely know those policies. When I came to my district too, we didn't have selection procedures that went along with those. So we added those, which just kind of add a little bit more specifics, like having review journals that we use and having a positive review for each book. We make sure that our books are reviewed for at least one grade level at the campus, those kinds of things. So we put those in place. So your district may already have those in place, probably so. So if they do, make sure that you know those as well. And then just again, just know those policies and procedures so that you can speak to them. It's just really helpful when you're talking to your administrators and parents about that. Like in my school, I have 5th through 8th grade, which is kind of tricky when you've got incoming 5th graders, and then you also have kids who are almost going to high school, all reading from the same collection. But when my parents start to understand that and know that I'm going to have books reviewed for those different levels, it helps to be able to understand that better. All right, then of course, be aware of your district's reconsideration policy. Again, I kind of knew that before, but now I certainly know, and make sure you know those steps that are required when a formal challenge is submitted. All of that is laid out most likely in your district. So make sure again that you're aware of it, and don't get nervous. Just kind of know that that's there and that you have those steps in place. And if they're needed, it's all there. And then again, have that available. I would say put that on your website, make sure it's on your district media's website, which media page, which I'm sure it is. and have copies available so that if anything happens, you've got it right there. You can calmly hand that to a parent who might be upset. And then that just kind of helps kind of steer the conversation away so that they can take that with them, rethink and see if they want to follow through with it, but you've got it all ready to go. And then make sure you've talked to your administrators about those procedures because they may not have read them ever or in a while. And so they may not even be aware of how extensively those things are covered. So make sure that they know. And then also that they know all the procedures that you go through to build your collection. Again, as I always say, my motto in education is once you leave the classroom, no one knows what anyone else does and they assume it's nothing. So help them to realize all that you do to build that collection. And we do so much to thoughtfully think about every bit that we put into our library collection. We read review journals, we go to book buzzes, we look at all the different things that are available. We assess our collection for diversity. We do all these different things. So let them know all that you're doing to build that collection so that they know that you're not just willy-nilly picking books to put in there, that you're really thinking about the needs of your students in your campus. Okay, then also maybe be aware if your district has a policy for visitors. This is something that we've had happen this year is where we have parents and visitors wanting to come in and to take pictures and videotape books in our library and in our book fairs. And this kind of rattled my librarians, but now we know that we have a set policy in the district that their visitors have to check in, they have to have permission from the principal, and they definitely cannot do any videotaping because of privacy issues and safety. So again, that is a policy, and make sure that you know yours and that you've talked to your administrators about it and they're aware of it and that you all have that plan in place in case something happens like that so that you're all protected and also just for the safety of your students. Then again, just continue to reassess your collection. Books do get outdated. They may not still be relevant. Things can happen where series, as you know, kids get older in the series and get more mature as the series age. Something happened with me where I ordered some books. My kids love manga, which I'm sure some of yours do, and that's a little bit harder to review and to figure out the best ones for your students. And I can have books in my library that are for 13 and up, so teen, but teen plus is a little much for us. But I had a series that started teen and then went into teen plus and got a little too much for us. And so I had to assess that and pull some of those that had gotten a little bit too much for us. So again, just kind of keep assessing, keep looking for those books that may not be relevant or may have gotten too mature or just may not fit the needs of your collection. Just keep looking for those books, know your collection and know your kids, really get to know them. Like for me, my population has changed a lot. It's getting more diverse than it used to be, which is a wonderful thing. So I'm really looking at all different kinds of books to make sure that my kids are being seen in the books, and then also that the wide majority of my kids are seeing a wider perspective of the world, which is what I really want. Okay, and then talk to your students about their rights as a reader. They should know that they have rights, even at any age. There was a librarian, Caitlin Carpenter, that posted to TLA Engage a lovely set of library bill of rights that you could put up in your library just to remind them that they have rights according to the amendments. And they don't even have to be the ones from the amendments. They can be the Rights of the Reader by Daniel Pinnock that's illustrated by Quentin Blake. I love those. Those can be used and reminded at any age that we just have rights as a reader. We have choice. We can choose the books that we read, and we can even choose to abandon a book. But all of that just helps remind our kids that they have rights. And of course, they're going to be guided by their parents, but we just want them to kind of always be seeing themselves as a reader who has choices. One thing that's really important with me is discussing the importance of the life skill of self-selection. I think kids need to learn to self-select their books just like they do with video games, TV shows, magazines, social media. That's something that they need as a life skill, and the library is the best, most wonderful place to learn that. As again, since I have fifth graders, we talk about that from the very beginning because they're going to encounter a wide variety of books when they come to me that they haven't had in their elementary library. And they're super excited, of course, when they get to see all those young adult books. And some of them are going to be right for those kids and some are not. So we talk about that off the bat so that they can start developing those skills. They're going to find books that are too easy, too hard, too challenging, too boring, and too mature. And anytime they find one that is too something, they can bring it back and get something else. And that is just, again, where they can start practicing that life skill, which is so important. And then my last tip is to just have an elevator speech ready about all of this. With all that's going on, somebody may stop you and just say, what do you think about what's going on? Or why do you think books are important? Or can you believe some of the books that are in these people's libraries? And just have some ideas of what you would say to those. It's kind of like sometimes if somebody just stops you and they're like, hey, what are the best books you've read this year? And you're just like, and you can't think of any book you've ever read because you're just so taken off guard when usually you could rattle off 25 books at the top of your head. So just kind of think through that and have some thoughts put together so that if someone asks you, you've got something in your back pocket. And you could use the TLA statement, some of our advocacy resources just to help you form your thoughts and then make them your own. So you've got some responses at your ready. All right, and then now Mary's going to say a few more things from the district perspective, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Right. Thank you, Jill. I guess my main thing as a district library leader is just to be proactive. Of course, like Jill said, you need to be familiar with your selection and reconsideration policy, but you need to be sharing that policy with your administrator. They have so many other things that are going on in their lives. And so it would just be so helpful, especially before a time when there is a problem. If you stop by and say, just wanted to chat with you for a minute just wanted to remind you about this, that we have a policy about in case anybody ever has a problem with a book. I always go and visit when I have new principals in the district. I always make an appointment and I go and sit down with them and say, I just want you to know that we do have a policy in case anybody ever has a problem with a library book. We have a policy to follow, and I am very well versed in that policy. We don't really get into details, but I tell them I'm well versed in that, and I will be happy to walk you through that when if anybody ever has a concern. So, I try to be proactive and to speak with administrators before there's ever any kind of a situation, so they know that, oh, there's somebody who can help me with that. And and it can, if you don't have a library director in your district, if maybe you're the only certified librarian, then that would be you would need to talk to your administrator and the administrators in your district and say, I'm very familiar with this policy and I'm happy to help you if anybody ever has a concern about a library book. It's also important that you talk to them about how library books are selected because they really do have no idea. I have to tell you about a conversation that I had with my superintendent. When the governor came out and was talking about how, apparently we have a lot of pornographic books in our libraries across the state. I wasn't aware of that, but apparently we do. So my superintendent, I was so proud of him when the letter came out and everything. I had a meeting with him and he verbalized that he understood that not every book was for every person, and that he understood that we needed to have a diversity of materials in the library. And so, so we had another conversation where he was asking about, how are the books picked out anyway? And he said, what I picture is that there's a website, kind of like Common Sense Media, or one of these movie websites that says, okay, this book has this many instances of violence and this many instances of explicit sexual content or whatever, kind of like they do for parents about movies. And I said, no, that's not the way it works. And so I explained that we use professional reviews because literature has to be taken as a whole. It can't be broken down by its parts. although there might be some challenging scenes or strong language, a lot of, it's there for a reason. The author is trying to develop the character, make the character realistic, or trying to show the toxic effect of negative behavior. We're trying to have realistic depictions of situations that teens deal with on a regular basis. And he was like, oh, okay, I see that. And so I explained that we have reviews that are, and that we can't read all of the books ourselves. One of my high schools last year, I looked to see how many books she ordered, and she ordered about 600 books for her library in 1 year. And there's no way that a librarian can read all of those books herself. So we have to rely on these reviews that are written by either subject matter experts or professional teachers and librarians. And what happens is that the professional takes the book, reads it in its entirety, and then writes a professional review that gives all of the information about the book and recommends it or doesn't recommend it for purchase. It's very important that our administrators understand how that happens and how that takes place, because especially after hearing from him with his idea of what happens, when they don't know, they make up what they think must happen, and that's not necessarily the case. And so we have to be proactive and be sure that they understand what the process is. And then we also need to talk to them about how, like Jill said, we're looking for books that represent all of the students on the campus that we serve, and be sure that they understand how important it is for kids to see themselves reflected in the books that they read, even though sometimes their reality is really harsh. Like maybe they have a drug addicted family member, or they have experienced sexual abuse themselves, or they live in a non-traditional family with gay parents. They deserve to see themselves reflected in the books that we have in the library. I feel so strongly that our schools and our libraries should be places where a student's dignity is honored and they feel a sense of belonging. And that's why we put so much care into the selection of our library books, because we want to be sure that our kids are treated fairly, that they feel appreciated and validated and accepted in our library. So I'll get off my soapbox there. Another thing that I would recommend is that you keep up to date on which books are being challenged around the state, and check to see if you have them in your collection, because honestly, things are not always placed perfectly. If you have the book, review it yourself to make sure that it meets your selection policy. Sometimes grade levels that a campus serves changes. In my district, we used to have 6th grade on the elementary campus, but we don't anymore. 6th grade was moved to middle school, but we still have a lot of books in our elementary libraries that really were purchased for those 6th graders. So they are a little on the mature side. And so sometimes we might find that something needs to be relocated to the middle school level. So I always advise my librarians, whenever we hear about something that is being challenged in another district where they're saying that it's not appropriate, we take a look at it. We're proactive in that. We go ahead and we pull it and we take a look at it. The librarian reads it, and with the selection policy in mind. Now, you have to be careful when you're doing this. So, because remember that removing a book for any reason other than not meeting your selection policy is infringing on your students' First Amendment rights. So you do have to be careful about that. And let me explain a little bit more about that. School boards are legally responsible for the books that are selected for the school library. but they're allowed to delegate that responsibility to certified librarians on the staff. So when you're developing your collection, you are actually representing your school board. The board, and by extension, you as the certified person, is not allowed to remove books from the library based on the ideas or perspectives that are contained in those books. And that comes from a Supreme Court case where a group of students sued their Board of Education for removing 9 books from their school library. And this was back in the 70s. But the Supreme Court ruled in the students' favor on First Amendment grounds, saying that the right to read is implied by the First Amendment. And so a public school cannot restrict books because libraries are places of voluntary inquiry. And they concluded that the school board's discretion over classroom materials does not extend to the library for that reason. So when we are looking at a book that we need to be sure that we're only looking at the selection policy and how it meets, whether it's high quality material, if it's age appropriate, if it meets curriculum needs, all of those things that are in the selection policy. But we don't need to be removing something because it might be controversial. Okay. The other things that I wanted to share, TLA, as president-elect, I have to tell you how proud I am of TLA for all of the things that they have been doing. Some things out in the forefront, some things kind of in the background, but I want to tell you what they've been working on in this area. They have formed a materials challenges work group, which has members of the Legislative Committee, the Intellectual Freedom Committee, and the Professional Issues and Ethics Committee. And they have been doing a lot of things in the background working on this issue. They hosted TLA hosted a materials challenges webinar in October. They've surveyed our members to determine who is currently facing challenges and how TLA could support them. And we had 134 responses, and 22 of those 134 had experienced challenges this year. We issued a statement in response to Representative Krause's letter. The statement reinforced the support of the freedom to read and opposition to any censorship activities. TLA also sent letters to TEA, members of the House General Investigating Committee, the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, and Governor Abbott, expressing our concern about these efforts to censor materials and expressing the freedom to read is a right. They launched an advocacy campaign and have sent more than 600 emails to members of the Texas House of Representatives about this issue. They've reached out to form partnerships with the Texas Association of School Administrators, the Association of School Boards, Texas PTA, the ACLU, the Association of Texas Professional Educators, and the Media Coalition to share our concerns. They've sent notes of appreciation to Senator Royce West, who questioned the governor's direction to TASB to establish standards for the selection of materials. Also sent a note of appreciation to Representative Dutton, who also questioned the validity of Representative Krause's investigation, and he expressed support for school libraries and their importance for student achievement. And they've communicated with publishers about our concerns in this area, with leaders at library schools across the state. They've fielded all kinds of media calls. I personally, and Jill has too, we both have spoken with several reporters talking about this issue. They've updated the TLA Intellectual Freedom page, all kinds of things. And I'm happy to announce that the Intellectual Freedom Committee is working on organizing a helpline that's going to be staffed with trained volunteers who can provide assistance and resources for librarians who are undergoing challenges. So, and this service is going to be available to any Texas librarian. You do not have to be a TLA member to take advantage of it, because this is one of our core values, defending intellectual freedom. And so we want to provide this service to anyone in the state. ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom also provides resources, and they also track data on challenges. So even if you don't really need their assistance, it is helpful to call them or email and report a challenge if you have one. So that is all I have. So I'm going to turn it back over to Barb.
Thank you, both of you. I feel re-energized after listening to both of you, and reassured. You know, this is a time when we all start to question where to turn, and it's really wonderful to know that we have such solid resources that we can count on. One of the first things that I heard you say was a librarian calmly responded. And isn't that important, right? Don't panic. We got this. The idea of being proactive. And I know that we've discussed this in class, the idea that make sure your administrators know your policy, make sure you know your policy first, of course, but make sure your administrators understand, and perhaps, you know, in one of the professional development sections, which usually aren't until August, but nevertheless, update your teachers so that they're comfortable, because everybody should feel good about the resources that we offer in our school libraries. Nobody should be doubting that we have anything that could be considered dishonorable. Yes, of course, we are going to have some challenging materials. That's the nature of education. And I love that you are emphasizing our core values, because I think that's so incredibly important. The rights of a reader, and the life skill of self-selection. I'll be taking that one back to class with me. Thank you, Jill. Wow, that's very powerful, isn't it? You know, developing those skills. We should be very proud, I think, as school librarians. And I think that's been a worry that we may have we may see a negative impact on school librarians going forward. So I guess that's my first question to you, and I'll ask others to post some questions in the chat area, and we'll make sure that they are asked. But how do you think this is going to affect school librarians going forward? I actually feel pretty good about it now. But what do you both think? Either of you, doesn't matter.
I'll start. I think everybody's a little fragile right now, because I mean, even just coming off all of the COVID and that whole experience and teaching online and all of that was so stressful. So I think everyone's a little stressed. And everyone's feeling a little shaky and scared because of everything that's happening. But then at the same time, I think some people are really galvanized by it. And, you know, we've had the hashtag freedom and the hashtag Freedom Fridays, where people have come on Twitter and spoke out about the books that have made an impact to them. And so a lot of people, I think, have kind of found their fight, and they want to fight for their readers. So I think we've got a little bit of both, and I'm hoping that people will stay strong, fight for their readers, will be galvanized, and kind of helping each other to stay strong. And things like this, I think, do help to because you may feel kind of alone when you're in your library by yourself and things are coming at you and you're kind of have parents asking questions, or you're hearing about something going on and it makes you feel a little concerned and like, oh, I'm just not sure about all this and this world is getting me down. But I think when we come together and help each other, that makes a big difference. What do you think, Mary?
Yeah, I think definitely so. It is great to have the support from TLA and from just our librarians around the state, seeing things on Twitter. And I think we can also think about it as an opportunity as well. It's an opportunity to share what we do as librarians and how we do choose the books that we select for our readers, and how we take that very seriously. And I think it has gotten a lot of people where they are mad that they've been accused of putting things in libraries that are not good for kids, and that is those are fighting words, right? So I think it's great to have this opportunity to talk about this with people that really it never even occurred to them before, how the books got there.
I agree. I'll say one last thing. Some people were saying to me, wow, what a time to be the TASL chair. And and then my husband said, he came and said, you know what, this is a great time to be the TASL chair. He said, what, you're so passionate about this, and speak out and you get to say the things that you care about. And like you said, Mary, this gives us an opportunity. It really is a time to turn it around, to get to speak about the things that we care about and to get to fight for our readers. So I agree with that.
Yeah, I absolutely, as I say, I feel re-energized just by listening to the two of you. But I agree, this is an opportunity for us as educators, as practicing school librarians, and both of you are amazing leaders. Seriously, you are really taking this on and not making it sound, as though we're all going to get dressed up and go to battle, but that we are going to defend our students and their rights. And I think that's so incredibly important. One of the things that occurred to me as the books were identified was this idea of who assigns the kind of ratings. And as a cataloger, teaching the cataloging class, I have to get my cataloging question in here, right? I'm just wondering if there isn't a role for some of that information, which we perhaps haven't used in the past. And where is that unbiased source that we can look to for that information?
I don't know that it's unbiased. It's unbiased so much as because when you are reading your reviews, School Library Journal might have it reviewed for 9 through 12, and Booklist might have it reviewed for 8 through 12. And so then you've got it on a middle school campus, and so it's that's kind of where the librarian has to know the books and know the readers that they have and the community that they serve, to know whether something that's given those grade levels is appropriate or not for their community. What do you think, Jill?
Sorry. Yes, I agree. That's I think that's always the hardest part when you're in trying to make those decisions. And I don't think there's just like one, sadly, there's not just one easy answer. And I usually have to I'll look at several reviews and see, some of them will give the ages. There are a couple that are my trusted ones and I'll go with those. And then, like you said, then some of them that are kind of iffy, you have to get them in, and then you just have to read those and then decide what you think. And it's hard. And like for me, again, I'm on a 5th through 8th. And so I've got these little 5th graders, and I'm always, and they can check out whatever, obviously. Mm-hmm. So I just have to keep all that in mind when I'm making those decisions. But I also have 8th graders who are about ready for high school, and they need a lot of great books too. And so I've got to kind of find that balance. And so I just try a lot of different things, and I have reviews that I trust. And you just do the best you can. But that's the whole thing of like, we are professionals and we are trained to do this and we do the best that we can. And then sometimes we're going to make mistakes on a few, but then you just gotta, but on the most part, we're going to do the right thing.
Okay, yeah, good, thanks. Jordan is saying, I wonder how you can speak out without feeling like your job is at threat when it's the district leads who are making the decisions to take the books off the shelves.
So I think that there is a way to have a conversation with those leaders that where you talk about the policy. That really is, that is the best thing you can do, is just remind them that there is a policy and, would it be possible for us to, there's a way you can phrase it without being, I don't know, dramatic or, in your face, or, there's a way to politely request that we follow the policy that our board has approved. Jill?
And I understand. I mean, that is so difficult. And I would say maybe too, you could, if there are others that you could go together, maybe a couple of you to kind of have some strength in numbers. And again, not like in a ganging up way, but just where you can support each other and say that we are concerned because we're not following the policy and that's a violation and we're not comfortable with this. And can we speak to about it and have a discussion? But I know that's really hard and it's very difficult when the administrators or those above are not following. That's a whole different situation. So I really sympathize for you. And we've had a somewhat similar situation in my district in the past, and it was difficult and things did end up resolved, but it was not easy. So I understand. I wish I could have more answers, but sadly right now, it's just such a challenging time and people are doing such knee-jerk reactions. And we do the best we can to keep everyone following policy, but that's not always the case.
And I think knowing that you have a policy and you both referenced that, at the beginning, make sure that you know what your policy is, and heavens, if you haven't got one, yeah, now is definitely the time to have a policy and a process for, the reconsideration, for the challenges, so that everybody feels honored in the process and that it isn't just going to be a knee-jerk reaction. Yeah. Okay, other questions? How about from my colleagues at UNT? Okay, Sabrina is saying, having reviews is great, but finding them isn't always possible. And she's thinking of nonfiction, but especially books in Spanish. Does anyone know of great resources to find reliable reviews for nonfiction or books in Spanish? Great question. Yeah. Anybody out there? Not just Mary and Jill. Yeah.
I was going to say, I find there are more and more trustable reviews for nonfiction. I'm finding now, just because we've got so much great nonfiction available, but because I use typically book lists to start and they tend to have a lot of great nonfiction, but unfortunately I do not know Spanish. That's not a large collection for us, but somebody else here I'm sure does.
Yeah, book list or school library journal are the two that we tend to rely on.
Right.
When I was a school librarian back not too long ago in both Pflugerville and Leander. And Leander, I was at a bilingual school, and I also struggled to find book reviews for the Spanish books. So I usually had to rely on the reviews for the English copies, because rarely, finding Spanish resources or resources in Spanish was difficult enough as is. And then finding any that don't have the English equivalent was rare. So that was my justification. And Becky, you may have something else to add about that.
It looks like Becky's saying about the same thing. if it's available in English, you could use the English, reviews.
Exactly. And I think the unfortunate thing is that not, like you said, not all Spanish books have reviews. And so if you can find it in English and Spanish, definitely use that.
And Kay had a good idea to check with Reforma.
Ah.
So thank you, Kay.
And I think this will be a continuing issue, is the languages. Okay. And Mona has joined us from out of state. She was in a session with us last night. So we publicized the event, and I'm glad to, hi, Mona, good to have you. So she's saying, do librarians in Texas use Follett and Mackin because those settings can be adjusted to make such selections, to have multiple reviews and in languages?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. And she's recommending school librarians find 3 positive reviews. I know some of the districts I've talked to are saying minimum of 2.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, good. Okay. Yes, definitely a lot of interest across the US in what's happening. And I'll go and locate that source, but in the IASL, those of you who attended our conference in the summer, and I think I recognize most of you from that as well. We had a North America regional meeting last night, and one of our Canadian colleagues has just posted a diversity site, which has a lot of resources that I think people would find useful. So I will go and find that so I can post that for everyone. And Tricia, can you handle the next round of questions while I go and do that?
Yes, I can. And actually, I had a question too. Mary, you were talking about a hotline. I think you mentioned that TLA was going to have. Do you know when we can expect to see that go live?
Sometime soon, but I'm not sure an exact date. They're
Okay.
working on working out the kinks. Yeah. Mhm.
Right, which is a brilliant idea. I could see that might take some time to get up and going, but I love it. Also, you mentioned that there were people that you could contact at TLA if you felt like you needed help or you needed resources. Do you have specific names of?
You can just call the TLA office and they will put you in touch, because the people on the Intellectual Freedom Committee, don't work at the TLA office. So they're librarians around the state. And so they will put you in touch with the person that you need to talk with.
Okay, perfect. That's very helpful too. Let me check the chat too to make sure. Also, it feels like, so I know this started, like you described it in the beginning, but it seems like it was a spark that caught into a flame. And now there are all these challenges everywhere, not related to the original incident,
Right.
and which that's pretty typical, I think, that this happens. So I do think a lot of people are just, the librarians I'm talking about, are feeling very intimidated because people with sometimes related to people in power even are in districts, are in positions of power in districts, and they come in with a very heavy hand and just say, this is how it's going to be. And they don't care about the process. They're ready to just go around the process. And I know that you have to push back and say something, but what if they just won't listen? Then what? And you try to be nice about it. We're all going to be nice at first, but then what comes next? If they're just like, no, this is how we're going to do it.
Well, if you're a district employee and they're above you, there's not a lot, honestly, that you can do other than enlist parents, students, people that have an interest in what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that there's a district right now, I think, that has there's a petition that their students have started putting together saying that, you know, we don't believe in this censorship that you've got going on, and we want the process to be followed. So
Yeah. Okay, and now you mentioned too that the school board is the ultimate group that makes a decision. So is going to a school board meeting as a group of librarians a good idea if you do reach that point where, you know, the powers that be, and I've seen this just with building principals who come in and just take books and say, yeah, this book is problematic. I'm just gonna hide it in my desk, or, you know, whatever the case may be. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but so that's one question. But then also for librarians who are worried about their job security, have you ever heard of cases where a librarian is fired for standing up for the process and for following the process as adopted by the school board?
I personally have not. Does anybody else?
I haven't.
That's good to know.
It is, because I haven't either. And that's what I tell you. Once you adopt your selection policy, your school board adopts it too, and that protects you.
Well, actually, it is adopted by the board.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. So then they are the ultimate authority in your school district. And what usually when push comes to shove, they will protect you. So that's helpful too. We're getting some more comments in the chat. Let me check just to make sure.
I think it's interesting that the students are petitioning. I was wondering, and I know we run the risk of viewing parents as our adversaries, which we of course don't. I don't think anybody wants that to be our stance. I know when we had all of the major budget downturns many years ago, and school librarians were in danger of losing their jobs, there were a lot of parent groups who stood up and said, we can't afford to lose our school librarians. They're too valuable to our students' education. So I wonder, in this process, how we engage that support.
Yeah, parents can be some of our best allies.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I feel like they don't know that it's happening. I really feel like a lot of, unless there's a big media outcry, they don't realize that it's even happening.
Right. So maybe that's also part of our kind of advocacy and proactiveness, is helping our parents also understand the process so that they feel more comfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm just looking back in the at the questions as well, along with Tricia. Yeah.
I wonder too if when these groups come in, if we can't write into our policies that only people affiliated with the school can raise a challenge about a book in a school. Is that ever done?
Actually, the policy says that any one in the community can raise a challenge because they are taxpayers for our schools, whether they have students in school or not. So that's typically what the policy says. But what happens with these organized groups is that they contact people in the community and they get them to approach the school board about the books or whatever issue they want to address.
And also just so everyone knows too, don't think that you can go sanitize your library and get rid of everything that would be controversial, because you cannot. Everyone finds something different controversial. So don't
Like
feel
I
like
said, you
need
can't
to do
say
that.
what's going to be controversial to someone. We had,
Absolutely.
I just, you have to laugh because we had a kindergarten parent who called the librarian about creepy pair of underwear. You know, she said underwear is private. We don't need to be talking about underwear. So, you know, you just never know what someone is going to think is controversial. You just never know.
That's my buddy Captain Underpants. He's always under siege. It's just like that one's a given, right?
Or when Junie B. Jones was popular, I would have parents complain about her being disrespectful to parents. They didn't like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that, you know, we also run the risk ourselves, introducing our own personal bias, which is why those selection policies, again, are so important. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The other thing is to talk with your community and let them know that if you have a concern, bring it to the librarian. You know, it doesn't need to go directly to the school board. A lot of times we can figure out what to do, whether it's, you know, help that child find something different that doesn't have anything to do with underwear. Or, you know, we can always help them find something different that is going to be perfect for their family. So, you know, it's all about communication with our administrators and our community, and letting them know how this process works, and that they absolutely have every right in the world to say what their own child reads. That, you know, we always want to communicate that to them, that we stand up for our parents having the right to say what their child reads. You know, we love it actually when a parent comes in and wants to talk about what their student is reading, because we have so many parents that don't monitor what their child reads. And that's important. So those parents are to be, you know, they're to be commended. And I'm always happy to talk with a parent who's concerned about a book, because they are concerned about their child and they have every right to be. So
and that's the perspective to
yes.
take. Exactly. Yeah. Great advice, Mary. Yeah. Oh, I'm not sure what article Jennifer's looking for. I'm just, you know, you're going to get
the one from a couple of years ago on self-censorship and the number of school librarians who practice self-censorship and what they why they're censoring. And I remember the first time I read the article, how surprised I was at how high the numbers are. Having been a librarian who experienced two rather difficult book challenges, I mean, I can attest it's not easy. It's not pleasant. It's not this ideal situation in your head where you talk calmly. I mean, it can be, obviously. But my experiences were not. And so I can understand why people would be inclined to want to avoid the conflict. But as school librarians, as librarians, I mean, this is one of our job responsibilities. This is a tenet of ALA. We are here to support and defend intellectual freedom and to provide our students, all of our students, with resources. So it's difficult, but it's necessary. And at the end of the day, it's worth it because you've done the right thing. And if I can find the article, I'll let you know. I'm sorry.
You can't ever predict what somebody's going to have an objection to. So there's no point in really censoring yourself, because what you think somebody might find objectionable, you know, they won't, but they're going to have a problem with creepy pair of underwear. So you can't predict it.
Right. That was actually one of the first pieces of advice I ever received as a librarian was, no matter what you think will be challenged, it will be something completely different. Like it will come out of left field and you'll be shocked.
But the best thing to do is just to say, let me take a look at that.
Yeah.
You know, thank you so much for monitoring what your child is reading, and let me take a look at it. And sometimes when you read it, you're like, yeah, that needs to go up to middle school, you know, or high school or whatever. But then you can, you know, you don't really have to get in that conversation about, you know, freedom to read, or, you know, you just say, when you're blindsided by it, just let me take a look at it. And that will give you some time to get yourself together.
And that comes back to why it's so important to have a collection development policy that is current, and also the reconsideration request policy. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Leslie's saying, I've volunteered to be on challenge committees as a community member. What would you want a parent to ask in these meetings that would help a librarian say what they need to? So in other words, for, community support. So if you're on a challenge, and what would be helpful for another parent to ask to help perhaps diffuse the anxiety and certainly assist with a calm conversation.
Well, when you're actually serving on a challenge committee, what's needed there is just somebody to be open-minded and willing to look at that selection criteria and see if the book that you're reviewing meets that criteria. That's really what is needed once you're in a challenge, because there is at least in my district, there is a form that the committee fills out, and there are all these questions that they have to answer about the book. And so that's really what's needed, is somebody that's open-minded enough to actually look at the book as a whole and see how it fits in to the instructional program of the school. Jill, do you?
Yeah, yes, that's what I was going to say, that when I was on the challenge committee, that's what we would look at. You wanted to read it, and like you're talking about, look at it as a whole. When on our committee, there were people who wanted to just look at all of the little parts that they didn't like. They didn't like the language here, or they didn't like what a character did here, instead of looking at the whole thing and what was the point of the book and why the teacher would have chosen that book for that curriculum and those teaks they were trying to teach. So I agree, it would just be wanting to look at that whole and trying to get them away from looking at just little parts they didn't like about the book. It's a good question.
Okay, and then another question. So let's say you decide that a book in your library is better suited for a different population. How do you, as the librarian, go about moving it to a better suited place? Does it need to go through the reconsideration process? I wouldn't know.
Not if it's reviewed positively for that grade level. So for us, my district's just really small, so I could just send it up to the high school or ask if they want it. And then for the same thing for elementary, they'll just ask us if we want it, if it seems like it's better for middle school, and we don't have to do reconsideration. And then if we don't want it, or we had too many copies or whatever, then we wouldn't take it, or we might weed it or give it to a classroom if it, some other choice there.
Yeah, it's we do the same thing. We say, but you have to remember that weeding is part of collection development. So if you find something that is better suited at another level, and you contact that librarian, and maybe they've already got a copy and they don't need another one, they don't want it. Yeah, I mean, you can just weed it if it doesn't fit your collection anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
That's okay to do.
We don't need a blessing for every, yeah.
No,
Right.
no, I mean, you're a certified professional. You can make that decision.
Okay, good. Yeah. And I think, you know, this is again, kind of the challenge we have between the theory, you know, as educators, and then that's what's so fabulous about having you both join us. What's really going on and how does it play itself out in your world? Because I mean, which is of course our world, but you
Right,
have the
right,
practical
weeding it.
application. Yeah.
Yeah, weeding it because it doesn't meet the selection criteria for your particular collection anymore is not censoring.
Yeah.
It's not the same
Is-
thing.
Are there a lot of challenges or concerns about, and I asked this because of, you know, Texas and Second Amendment rights and concerns over materials in the schools related to guns and, you know, education about how to handle those kinds of situations? Has that come up in any kind of a challenge, or it's a challenge in itself, I know, but.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Oh,
I haven't
Betty,
heard that, but Dr. Betty Carter wants to speak.
Oh, good.
you're
I
you're
do.
muted.
We've
There
had
you
a
go.
problem. We've had people request those books. Our problem is they don't meet the selection policy because they're not positively reviewed in terms of literary merit.
Okay. Mhm.
And I think it's not taking them off the shelf. I think it's putting them on the shelf that's actually a problem. Because we've been searching very hard in our area for safety and things like that.
Yeah, okay, thanks, that's. Yeah,
There's always
challenging
another-
times. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and Sean is saying role playing is a great idea for preparing for the interaction, you know, the interactions. I think it is too. I think it's always challenging when somebody is just so emotionally charged and they're like either in your ear or right in your face. And that, yeah, that is definitely something that I think we could all use some refreshers on. Yeah.
Well, you know, there's nothing that diffuses that better than thanking someone for being concerned for their child and telling them
That
what a
is-
good parent they are, because
That
they're
is such
concerned
great
about
advice. Yeah. Yeah. It does kind of take the steam out, doesn't it?
that.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else? Have we missed anything? Anything that anyone else has as a concern or? I have a question, just a quick about the legal department. Have all of your, at the district level, has the legal department been in touch, involved in any of these?
You mean the challenges?
Yeah,
The,
yeah.
or the request for,
And the request for, yeah, yeah,
yes, our district attorney was involved in a
Okay.
conversation about how to handle the request from Representative Krause in my
Okay.
situation.
We didn't have the request at our district, so we haven't had the legal department involved in this particular, you know, last few months. But I've mainly been in contact with the communications department because of personal information requests and those kinds of things. So been involved in different ways.
yeah. But it's good to know that that's a resource that's there, you know, as well. So, okay. I feel that this has been a very enlightening evening. And as I say, re-energizing. I feel a lot better about it's not that I'm not trying to minimize, the challenge or the difficulties, but I love the idea that we're all in this together. I think
And that's
that's
what
important.
I told my librarians was that, what we have to remember is that we're not necessarily defending a particular book. We are defending our students' right to read. And
Exactly.
we are defending the policy, or we're going by the policy. So you've got that policy, the policy's your friend, and it needs to be followed to the letter. And, I really think if you can remember those things, that, you don't really have an opinion about the book, but you do have an opinion about kids' right to read.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And our role in building that self-selection skill. That is just a huge takeaway for me. Thank you. Thank you for
Absolutely.
that. And Becky has posted the AASL town hall tomorrow night. So if everybody wants to copy that down. This session is, as you know, recorded, and on our Multiple Literacies website, the recording will be made available. So I'm just watching to make sure that I'm not missing any instructions I'm supposed to give you, but nope, looks like I've.
And Barb, I
got it.
also
Yeah.
have I just made a document with some of the sources that I mentioned. So
Wonderful.
I'll put this link in the chat as well.
Okay. We won't close off until we see that.
Let me see if I can get it there.
Thank you all so much for having us. This is
Oh.
a treat.
Thank you so much for joining us. It is an absolute honor to have you both with us this evening. Seriously. Oh, there we go.
There we
Can
go.
everybody
is.
see the Google Doc that Mary's posted? So you can copy that and follow the link. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay
Thank you so
safe,
much.
stay healthy, and stay strong.
You too.
Okay.
It's great to
Good
be
night,
here.
everyone. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you again for joining us. Okay. Good night.
Thank you.